Welcome to the program. I'm Mark Imperial. This segment's being brought to you by booksgrowbusiness.com. It's the place where busy professionals get their books done to educate consumers, grow their businesses, and to leave a legacy. I'm doing a series of spotlights on remarkable business intermediaries and brokers from across the country. And joining me on this segment is Bill Grunau. He's the founder of Pacific Business Sales. Bill, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for inviting us.
Bill, tell me a little bit about your work, and specifically, who are those types of clients that you specialize in helping?
So there's many different kinds of business brokers. We're a bit unique as compared to the bulk of business brokers. The vast majority of businesses that are sold are, what we call Main Street businesses, restaurants, retail, B2C businesses, and small businesses like you see every day at strip malls or whatever. And we call those Main Street businesses. Our particular firm, we don't sell Main Street businesses. Our focus is on the middle, what's often called the middle market. And we strictly focus on industrial businesses like manufacturing, a lot of construction, healthcare. We do e-commerce when it's larger e-commerce companies. And so it's mainly an industrial focus. So our transactions tend to be in that segment, not in the Main Street segment. So we're quite a bit different than most.
I see. So for those types of businesses, it seems like people probably have run those for many years. So is this like the first time they're going through the process of selling a business, so they don't quite know the
Yeah,
process yet?
well,
So
that's always true, but yeah, it's interesting in the industrial or the manufacturing segment. So restaurants and retail turn pretty frequently. And as a matter of fact, every year, restaurants and retail businesses are 70% of the transactions every year, consistently over the decades. I mean, two-thirds or more by transaction numbers are all those kinds of businesses. They turn frequently. They turn every few years just for various reasons. On the industrial side or the manufacturing side, businesses like that, the larger ones, it's not uncommon for those businesses to sell once every 20 or 30 years. And to give you a comparison in that demographic, 4% of the transactions every year are manufacturing businesses. So you got two-thirds are retail and restaurants, and just 4% are manufacturing businesses. They don't turn very often. Most of the time, well, we sold an aerospace distributor last year that was established in 1954.
wow.
Yeah, so we sold it. We sold it. The owner was 72 years old. He was the youngest son of the founder. So it'd been through the father and two siblings, and then he was the youngest sibling, and he finally sold it at 72. So, and that's not uncommon. A lot of our businesses that we sell are 25, 30 years old. So they don't turn very often. And obviously, it's a 30-year-old business. They haven't sold very many before, right?
That's right. So when they started that business, do you think they founded it to sell? Was it built to sell, or is this sort of an
No,
afterthought?
no, all of those businesses, they're typical entrepreneur stories. I mean, one guy we sold his electrical contractor business. It was 17 million in sales and 140 employees. He'd been established 30 years. He literally started it when he was a kid with a beat up red Bronco and one helper.
Wow.
That was his start. I mean, an old beat up red Bronco, and I'm going to be an electrician. A plumbing company we have closing this month. Actually, it has, let's see, 20 well over 20 employees. Same thing. He graduated high school, didn't want to go to college, went out and became a plumber the day after he graduated. Had his journeyman card in 2 years, had his contractor's license 2 years after that. Started a business, and over 30 years he grew it to that. And he's actually retiring in his early 50s.
I love those
But
kinds of
he was
stories.
just,
I absolutely love
yeah.
those stories, though. But uh, when they come to sell, by the time they reach you wanting to sell, since they're new to selling their business and they didn't really intend on it when they started it, how informed are they or misinformed are they? Do they have a lot of weird questions, or what are the biggest concerns on their minds?
So oddly, very few sellers. I mean, I'll say no sellers I can remember. The dollars are a secondary consideration. They're all, when they've had a business that long, they're selling it for personal reasons. They're tired of doing it. They're tired of running it every day. Like, like the plumber, he'd been a plumber since he was 18 years old. He's really tired of being a plumber, even though he's running the business and he's the boss, he's not turning a wrench anymore. He's just tired of being a plumber, and he's worked hard for 30 years. He wants to enjoy it. So it's a personal decision. So it's what's driving the sale is always a personal decision. And then secondarily, oddly enough, the money still isn't necessarily the second consideration, maybe a close second, but they're really concerned about their employees. If they're a good business owner, they're really concerned about confidentiality of the sale, so that customers don't find out and freak out, or the employees don't find out and have a panic attack. So those are the really driving considerations. They're really worried about that when we first talk to them. How are we going to do this? How do we keep it confidential until we know it's closed? Will the employees be taken care of? Are their jobs secure? And then, is the legacy going to continue? Will the company continue to thrive? So a big consideration is finding the right buyer that can run that business successfully going forward. Most of them consider their employees like family, and they consider their business like a child of theirs. So the money is important, obviously, but it's not the driving factor. They've got lots of questions. They've never done it before, so yeah, we start from scratch.
Yeah, linked to that question about how informed are they? Are there any like weird myths or misconceptions floating around out there that people kind of hold on to? Or are there any weird beliefs that may not quite be true about selling a business?
Yeah, lots of them actually. So, you know, some interesting theories some sellers have is how the business is valued, and there's all kinds of kooky ideas. They might. It's I mean, there's I can't even count the different ways they think it's valued, but there's a
Too
very
many
formal
AOL
way to value a
stories, I bet.
business. Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, and a lot of them hear myths like, I hear businesses sell for this many times earnings, right? Whatever that number is. Well, the first question on that is which earnings? Because there's net profit on the tax return, there's discretionary earnings, which I'll explain in a second. There's EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, and depreciation. So which earnings are you talking about? So taking the two that we use to value businesses, which is discretionary earnings and EBITDA, even those numbers are different from each other, and they have different multiples for valuing the business. So you might have, say, a contractor, a large contractor that maybe the multiple for that in the comparable sales figures, maybe the multiple for that is, let's say, 2.75 times discretionary earnings. On EBITDA, it might be 4 times EBITDA. So when you hear all these multiples tossed around casually with your friends or even your accountants, I've seen accountants get it totally wrong. And they say, oh yeah, it should sell for 4 times earnings. Great. Which one? Because EBITDA is a higher multiple of a lower number, and vice versa with discretionary earnings. It's a lower multiple of a higher number. In a perfect world, those two numbers should converge and be fairly close, but they're different numbers. So discretionary earnings is basically, if you take the number, your net profit on the tax return, add back the owner's salary and payroll tax, his total compensation, and then all of his benefits that are run through the company. Now the hook on that is those benefits have to show up in the tax return as an expense. You can't just make up things. I mean, it's got to tie to a line item on your tax return, like travel and entertainment was $20,000 a year, and we'd like you've got to see 20,000 on the tax return, right? And all those, so the sum total of the profit on the tax return plus the owner's salary and all of his benefits like healthcare, travel, all that sum total is discretionary earnings. The easy way to calculate, well, EBITDA technically for a huge company like, say, Disney or Verizon or GM, it's easy. It's earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. You take the net profit on the tax return, add back interest, depreciation, amortization, right? Boom, boom, done. That's EBITDA. In a small business, you got to do what we call normalized EBITDA. And the normalized EBITDA is basically, the easy way to do it is calculate the discretionary earnings and then subtract from that a market value replacement salary for a general manager to run the business or a president. So let's say you had $500,000 of EBITDA. We might we might subtract out from that $200,000 a year to replace you with a CEO or GM or something like that. And that's how those numbers work. So, and likewise, people sometimes think, oh, well, businesses sell for 10 times earnings, 20 times earnings, or I heard that, so and so sold their business. Well, yeah, those might be public companies, which are wildly different valuations. Likewise, you'll hear stories about somebody selling their company to, like, say, a private equity group, and maybe they got 10 times earnings. I promise you, there's always a story there. There's a story behind that number. Did they get 10 times earnings cash at closing? I promise you they did not. Private equity deals always have a lot of hooks in them where there's maybe there's an earn out where, like, we're going to give you, we're going to give you $10 million for the company, but we're only going to give you $5 million cash at closing. And the other $5 million is conditional on you achieving earnings goals over the next 5 years or 3 years. Or maybe they want you to carry a whopping big seller note, or there's always terms in there. So, they lure you in with the $10 million, right? It's like, oh, wow, I'm going to get 10 times earnings for my company. It's like, yeah, but here's how we're going to pay you. So there's lots of myths out there. And on the larger transactions like that, there's a lot of deal terms that come into play when you're selling your company to, like, an equity group. It gets really complicated really quick.
All those formulas you mentioned make my head spin. So just take my
Yeah.
money, please, and
Yeah,
let
I
me
know. I'm
know.
sorry. I rattle it off pretty quick. I apologize
That's
for
a
that.
lot of formulas, so we'll leave that to the experts.
Yeah.
But Bill, let me ask you this: this whole series has been inspired by the headlines,
Hmm.
the Great Resignation, people wanting to go into business, and what safer way to do that than to buy an existing business. How's that affected your field and your specialty? Are you seeing a lot more buyer
Yeah.
interest now, and how's that motivated your sellers?
It so I don't think it's motivated the sellers that much, but there are a lot more buyers jumping in, and a lot of them are from the Great Resignation, where they're tired. Some of the best buyers out there are really, really well-educated young MBAs, or that, or corporate guys that have risen pretty far pretty fast, and they're not seeing they're not liking the destination that's ahead, just staying in the grind and never having any equity or never owning the business, always being stuck in a corporate grind. And corporate jobs today have absolutely zero job security. I mean, the higher you go, the more insecure your job is. And that could change in a heartbeat with an acquisition or a management change or whatever, or just a bad day on the stock market. And so we're seeing a lot of young people come in as young entrepreneurs, looking to buy businesses, and that's increased the buyer pool with some really, really talented and very capable buyers. It's something new in the last few years, which is really unique, is because a lot of times what stops young people, like, and I say young by my standard, like, let's say under 40, from buying a business, is they don't have a lot of money, for a down payment. And that's really put the brakes on them from buying a business. In the last few years, we've seen a new trend called search funds. And search funds are where private equity groups or wealthy investors that own family offices, we'll call them a private equity group, they will basically be backers for a very, very talented young entrepreneur. And they'll be the backers, they'll put the money in, they'll fund them for maybe a year to go off and find a business. And so they're the searcher, they're the entrepreneur. And they bring the deal to the table. If the search funds, usually there's, like, I don't know, half a dozen to even 10 to 15 that are, like, in that pool, right? If they like the deal, it's kind of like Shark Tank. If they like the deal, they'll give it a thumbs up and they'll buy into it and fund it. And this is allowing young entrepreneurs in their 30s and 40s to buy companies that are valued at 10, 20, $30 million, that they would never have that kind of cash to pony up the down payment and get the finance, or the ability to get the financing. And we've got a couple of those in work right now with search fund buyers on fairly large businesses, and they're talented young people. That's a brand new trend in the last few years. And some of these search funds themselves are doing 10 to 15 deals a year for each office. I mean, they're driving a lot of deals, and they're larger deals. They're all north of 10 million. And there's actually literally hundreds of these search funds out there. It's a fairly new trend. It's really an interesting dynamic that's changing a lot of things.
Fascinating insight. Bill, what inspired you to even get in this field? Like, take us back and tell me a little bit about how you got started.
So in the midst of the dot bomb, if anybody's old enough to remember that, in 2000, I was working for a large semiconductor software company, and I was a VP there, launching some product lines in the middle of the dot bomb storm. Not a great time for anybody in the high tech business. We had customers that were shrinking at 30%, and we're trying to sell them very expensive software in a contracting market. So that was pretty brutal. And I'd been at that time, let's see, I was 45 then. And honestly, at the end of that stint at 45, I actually felt like I was aged out of the high tech business at 45 years old. I had been a CEO of an $18 million company, a VP of a $60 million semiconductor company, a really, really successful career. And at 45, I kind of felt like I was aging out, though. I just felt, I don't know why, I was kind of stupid at the time, but I was also just burnt out on the corporate rat race. I just didn't, I didn't have another one in me even at 45. So my wife and I looked at different options, trying to figure out what we're going to do, and we just kind of accidentally stumbled across business brokerage, and we got into this business in 2001, and it's been a really, really good fit for us. We enjoy the business and lifestyle. I love doing deals. Um, I intend to stay in the business for the foreseeable future and really enjoy doing it.
Fascinating. Bill, sounds like a great match with all of your knowledge and your passion for the thing. So congratulations on all of your success. For folks listening right now who are considering selling their business and don't quite know where to start and they'd love to speak with you, how do they find you, connect with you, and learn more?
Well, so for us, it's easy to find us. Just go to pbsbrokers.com, as in Pacific Business Sales, just pbsbrokers.com. We've got a lot of resources on the website on selling and buying a business. So there's plenty of information there. On the buyer side, one thing I'd encourage buyers to do is a great book on buying a business that's, and the author is dead on as far as his advice, which is rare, is called Buy Then Build. And on the buyers that are thinking about buying a business, they should really start there. It'll give them a lot of insight, and the figures he throws out are correct and accurate. He's not he's not pushing fantasies or smoke and mirrors. He's dead on. That's a really, really good book for buyers to read on their side. Our side has it. Our website has lots of resources for buyers and sellers.
Thank you so much for that recommendation. And Bill, this has been terrific. I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your insights with my audience today. And I wish you continued success for you and for all of your clients.
Yeah, you too, Mark. Thanks for inviting us to the episode, and thanks for offering the episode. It's good to see somebody covering this market because it's largely ignored.
Thank you so much. That was Bill Grunau. He's the founder of Pacific Business Sales. And this segment's been brought to you by booksgrowbusiness.com. It's the place where busy professionals get their books done and published so they can educate consumers, grow their practices, and leave a legacy. That's all for now. I'm Mark Imperial, and thanks for joining me.